What's up, everybody? Welcome to Best Ball Live. I'm your host. My name is Greg. Joining me this week from 4for4.com, the great TJ Hernandez at TJ Hernandez on Twitter. What is happening, TJ? How you doing?
Great. What's up, man? Happy to be here. You got me right in the middle of my best ball bonanza. I kind of started firing at both FFPCs and a bunch of tournaments on other sites as well. So I've been deep in these best ball streets the last couple of weeks, man.
That's awesome. Yeah. How much of this Superflex best ball have you done, if any?
None. So we're gonna
Awesome.
be popping the cherry today, but we're in the middle of SFB 11. So that's my Superflex exposure right now. I've been drafting. I have been drafting FFPC Slims. Obviously the values will change a bit, but yeah, this will be my first Superflex best ball league this year.
Yep. We drew the 10th pick in this particular league. Not a bad spot to be for Superflex. That means you're still getting either a high-end quarterback or a high-end running back, wide receiver, or tight end at the end of the first round. And then you come right back around in the second round, hopefully get another one of those same types of fantasy assets. So I like being at the end of the draft order in Superflex. I don't know about what you did in Scott Fishbowl, but I requested the 12th pick in my league, and that's what I got. I feel good about it. We'll see how the rest of the draft goes, but for now, like that was kind of my mindset, was especially with the third round reversal in Scott Fishbowl. I want those first two picks back to back, and then I want the earliest third round pick I can get. So give me the 12th spot. Is that what you went for? Or did you do something different?
I chose the 10th for the same reasons that you kind of just now laid out. I didn't want to be all the way at the turn just because you have to wait so long between picks. I think like those 4 picks make a big difference instead of waiting for 24 picks, just because Scott Fishbowl is so subject to unexpected runs because there's no rhyme or reason to how your draft's going to go. So you might think, and this guy has an ADP 3 rounds later, so he'll still be there, and all of a sudden a random position goes. So I like it not being all the way on the turn for that reason, and being off the turn a little bit gives you a little bit of game theory if you can
play those other drafters a little bit, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you have a quarterback or a tight end that you're targeting and they already have filled that spot, you obviously can make some educated guesses as to if they're going to take a second or third player at that position. So, yeah, I like the back end of the first round in SFB. Third round reversal came up because it's basically the LaDainian Tomlinson role, right? That's how it kind of came about. And you can argue Christian McCaffrey is our LaDainian Tomlinson, but LaDainian Tomlinson was so far above the field that it was the only way to make drafts fair. In this kind of structure where there's not even a clear 1.01, right? Some people are taking Mahomes, some people are taking CMC. If there's not even a clear 1.1, then I think it's pretty obvious to be at the back end in this kind of format. But we're not doing third round reversal here, but it's fun to talk about.
No, for sure. But you drew 10th pick in SFB. You drew 10th pick here. Just out of curiosity, who'd you take in the first round there in SFB?
Russ.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think probably SFB is even more quarterback heavy than a traditional Superflex because we have,
especially at the top.
Especially at the top, because not only the rushing first downs, the point for completions, and the point for incompletion. So basically, the most, if you have an efficient mobile passer, they're not only lap the field like we saw the quarterbacks last year, they really lap the field because they're getting the rushing plus the bump for efficiency. Basically, completion percentage, higher completion percentage, the more points you're going to get.
So we'll see if Russ lasts until the 10th pick, and we can put you to a different sort of decision here where the scoring's a little different, the format's a little more basic. But we're off to the races. I've always set up these streams with one position in the queue so that we can kind of toggle between what's in the queue and what's over here in the larger player pool. So we see McCaffrey go first. No big surprise. Mahomes will probably go with one of the next couple picks. And so I'm going to pull up running back. But if you want me to switch between, wide receivers, tight end, this is a tight end premium format. So the elite tight ends do matter in the first round. And so you tell me what you want to do when it gets closer. But just in general, is there a particular position you would prefer to start your draft with in this format?
Yeah, obviously it's tight end premium, but it's also Superflex, right? So it kind of throws a wrench not just in the value of the high-end guys, but also in how you're going to manipulate the roster construction of your team. A lot of traditional best ball leagues is 18 rounds. You can get away with 2 quarterbacks if you take an early quarterback. All the quarterbacks are kind of early, so you kind of want 3 quarterbacks almost no matter what. Some people are taking 4 depending on how late they start with their quarterback. So then you kind of get into, can you get away with 2 tight ends? And then obviously that's going to trickle down to your running backs, wide receivers. I played with some win rates. Last year was the first year that FFPC did the Slim. So looking at last year's FFPC Slim Superflex leagues, one of the highest win rates that you can have was taking 3 quarterbacks and getting your quarterback specifically in the first round. That win rate was a little over 11%. So I think getting a high-end quarterback is really important, even more so than getting a high-end tight end like a lot of people go for in these formats. So long way of saying I really think it's important to get a quarterback here. I'm targeting high-end quarterbacks in all of my best ball drafts just because we have like the top 8 to 10 guys. I wrote an article recently on 4for4 just discussing how they're basically lapping the field, and I think it's going to take at least another year before some of these rookies catch up to what we saw from the top 10 guys last year. I mean, the top 8 guys, really, they were just so far ahead of the field because not only are they mobile, but they're efficient. So quarterback's huge for me in best ball formats in general right now, and especially so in flex. So we're going to get one of our two guys here with Herbert and Wilson still available. I think Hurts is probably just like still a slight kind of in his own tier because I think he's ahead of all the other guys because of his mobility. But Russ is just uber efficient, and I think Herbert's fine, but Russ, I have him ahead of Herbert, so I like Russ here. So
I have Wilson ahead as well. Herbert did so well last year, kind of coming out of nowhere, but I'm not the type of player who instantly wants to assume that the same is going to be true the following season. Yeah, the worst thing we can do is overreact to last year's stats. And I think Herbert, while I think he's good, I think he presents a dangerous case in that regard.
Yeah, his efficiency was insane last year, and there's really only 2 quarterbacks ever that we could bank on that kind of efficiency. It's Russ and Aaron Rodgers, and now we got Patrick Mahomes in that mix. He's done it in enough years in a row where his efficiency probably is going to stay an outlier for at least the next the short future. But I don't think you can assume that with Herbert. You're just not going to assume a 6-7% touchdown with anyone really. Can you toggle to tight ends real quick?
Oh yeah, of course. So yeah, we saw that quarterback run happen, and Kittle is still available. Then there's the perceived drop-off down to Pitts, Hawkinson, Andrews. So that is a consideration perhaps with this next pick. There goes Stafford. That's a little early for Stafford, if you ask me. But top quarterback by FFPC is Burrow. Top tight end is Kittle. Let's take a look at the running backs. Plenty of great names there. And wide receivers, obviously, everyone's still available. What are you thinking here, TJ?
Yeah, since we're on a time limit, I'll just say I want the tight end here. I want Kittle, and then I'll kind of get into it. I want kind of like I talked about with quarterbacks, they're at a premium here, and tight ends. I want a top 3 tight end in a regular league, just because like the top end quarterbacks, we're kind of seeing them also lap the field. We see extremely high win rates from the elite tight ends the last few years. Obviously, that's really weighted by Kelsey, but Kittle a couple of years ago was in that group, and then Waller last year was also in that group. So even when it's not tight end premium, I want one of those guys. This being full PPR, I think there is obviously a argument for Kamara. You can argue it downgrades Henry, and I've been very comfortable drafting a lot of receivers in these middle rounds 3 through 7, right? Just loading up on them. So I'm not too worried about getting a high-end receiver here. Wide receiver 2s and 3s have kind of been converging on the wide receiver 1s the last few years. If we look at it as a whole, obviously you're going to have outliers like Devontae Adams, but I've also been very comfortable. I've done enough best balls and done enough leagues where I'm not afraid to miss out on a running back, especially if I am drafting from the back end of the first round. If I don't get a Saquon or a Dalvin or a CMC, I don't think it's a must to get a first or second round running back. I'm really concerned out of all of the first round running backs. extremely concerned about Alvin Kamara's outlook this year with the change in the offense. Just the chance that they could end up being, not they're I did a mini study, more than just a tweet today, looking at weekly implied point totals for all of the teams that's available from the Super Contest odds has implied or spreads and over-unders for every single game right now. So New Orleans is relatively high in their projected point total, but they've typically been like one of the highest projected teams in terms of wins and points. And I just don't know if they're going to be there. Obviously, Kamara his volume's great, right? He's a great PPR receiver, but his touchdown rates have been through the roof since he entered the league, except for 2 years ago when he was hurt. But he's really lived off like 8% touchdown rates. The league average for running backs is below 4, like 3.5%. He's scored on 8% of his touches in his career. People think Jameis is going to start, which would negate those issues we had with Taysom Hill at quarterback last year and Alvin Kamara's drop in workload. But Jameis likes to chuck it downfield. He hasn't traditionally checked down to his running backs either, although that really is a talent stat. We saw that with Cam Newton for his whole career, and he got CMC and he threw to him over 100 times. So I'm not saying that Jameis wouldn't do that, but I'm just really worried about Kamara as a top 5 running back this year. We also passed on Derrick Henry. There's no reason to think he's going to have a bad year, obviously. But he doesn't catch the ball, and he also had a really high touchdown rate. You can't project 2,000 yards. So I'm not feeling horribly if I miss out on Derrick Henry this year. I know that probably goes against what most people think, but man, I know he's a beast, and everyone says, look, he's fine. Look how healthy he is with all this work. He's going to keep doing it. We've never seen it, man. We just don't see people get the workload that he's gotten over the last 3 years and hold up. And people point to Adrian Peterson, and it's like, listen.
Peterson was a freak, though. That guy was not human.
He was a freak, but also the thing you have to remember is the first time he went through a run like Derrick Henry did right now, I think he missed 3 or 4 games. Then he had a 2-year period where he had another crazy high touch year. And then I think he played like 4 games, 2 or 3 more years with big touches, and then a year where he missed 4 or 5 games. So like every 2 or 3 years, Peterson had a year where he missed a lot of time. And you look over the body of his career and you're like, oh, he was always healthy. He was always getting 300 touches. He wasn't, man. Like running backs just cannot hold up with that much work. CMC last year, like you can't predict it, but if I miss out on a top 2 or 3 running back, I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, the concern with Kamara really does just come back to the quarterback situation, right? It's like Breeze was hyper efficient. Breeze was very good in those short and intermediate areas of the field. We've not really seen Jameis be efficient or be productive in that way. The thing I like about Henry is what we saw them do to their wide receiver group, right? They lose Corey Davis. That's not great, but you bring in Julio Jones. And at the very least, like, that passing attack is going to keep the defense relatively honest against Derrick Henry. I think you might see some like up and down roller coaster between passing and running game with the Titans. But that's what we've seen the past couple of years. This is kind of how it works. The bigger concern for me there is Arthur Smith leaving. And I'm not sure how much that offense is going to be affected by that play caller being gone. But we can talk a little bit more about that later. We are on deck here. I'm going to pull up the draft room.
Can you toggle to quarterbacks for me, please?
Quarterbacks, we have Brady, Rodgers, Lawrence, Matt Ryan, Trey Lance. It's the top of ADP according to FFPC. I'll jam a bunch more of these folks into the queue. And then I'll pull up some other positions to compare. So tight end, I don't know if you're a fan of going big on 2 top-end tight ends. I don't know if we have that luxury in Superflex, but it's something we could consider with Pitts and Hawkinson and Andrews all available here. Going to running back, Aaron Jones, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, top of the rankings, and then wide receiver, Devontae Adams is still there. So again, lots of great options here. What do you think of TJ?
I know we have a pick coming up at 4.03, but we have a pretty good opportunity to kind of solidify our Superflex here. I like taking the risk on Aaron Rodgers here, even though we don't technically know he's going to play. I mean, I got news that he re-upped his membership at his country club in Green Bay recently.
Reading the tea leaves. I like it.
Yeah, that's from Andrew Fleischer. So I like Aaron Rodgers here.
That's some TMZ stuff right there. I like it. All right, we're going to take Rodgers.
I think when we're playing best ball and we're thinking about it in terms of building a portfolio, if you're trying to break 100 leagues like I am, which is low compared to some people, but
yeah,
you're looking at your portfolio. If we get word tomorrow that Aaron Rodgers is for sure 100% playing, his ADP is going to skyrocket back to like probably top 5 or 6 quarterbacks. So I mean, this is the only time we're going to get value on him all season. So you might as well take it. I don't think his ADP is going to drop unless we hear something crazy, but it can definitely go up. So now's the time to buy him, I think.
Nice. Yeah. So we're on deck here again, and let's pull up the draft board just to see who went. We saw Pitts, Aaron Jones, and Trevor Lawrence all go. And there goes, who was that? Latest pick was Metcalf. So we're not going to get to stack Metcalf with Russ, unfortunately.
But we can stack Devontae. So I think that's the move there.
I think that couldn't have worked out better for us. So well done on the Aaron Rodgers pick. Like getting Devontae Adams to pair with him back to back. Like that, Devontae Adams is a 4th rounder. Superflex is great, man. Where else do you get to do that?
Nowhere. I mean, this really falls into a discussion of roster construction now that we have. We're through 4 rounds without a running back. So kind of the thing that we should be very cognizant of when we're playing best ball is how many players you're drafting at each position. Starting with quarterbacks and tight ends, you kind of stay in that 2 to 3 range. In Superflex, you can make the argument for 4 quarterbacks. I think it's starting with 2 early. This is where we stick with 3. I think you still want a 3rd one pretty late. But the discussion becomes now. It looks like with an early tight end, this is a team where we're going to have probably 3 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends, and then the discussion becomes with those other 13 picks. How do you allocate them to your running backs and wide receivers? Traditionally, you're probably going to go with 13 picks, 5 running backs, 8 receivers, or 6 running backs, 7 receivers. I think with no running backs through 4 rounds, this we already kind of know that this is going to be a 6 running back, 7 wide receiver team.
Yeah, we've waited long enough at running back to the point where we know we're going to have to draft a lot of them to get coverage at that position. I want to go back to what you were talking about with the tight ends earlier, because draft after draft on these live streams, we've come to the same conclusion that you want that elite tight end so that you only have to draft 2 of them so that we can lean into that roster construction where we get an extra pick to spend on wide receiver running back. I want to flip the tables on you and say, okay, what happens if you don't get one of those elite guys and you are looking to maybe draft more tight ends, kind of punt the position or soft punt the position to some extent? Like, what's your approach if you miss on those elite guys? Like you talked about tight end win rate. How do owners typically find a high win rate tight end if they're not taking the elite guys? Like, what has your research found in that regard? You want to, this is kind of where people, I think, butcher, especially in FFPC, which it isn't half PPR, and the full PPR does make a big difference, and the tiny premium makes an even bigger difference. You can really kind of Frankenstein's monster a fantastic tight end trio. If you don't wait super long on your tight end 2 or 3. I think people say, okay, I'm going to get 3 so they can be cheapish. The third one can be cheap. That's what we're leaning here, right? The third one is where you want to skimp out.
It can be cheap-ish, but like if you're taking I don't know,
Mo Alley Cox.
You're just getting zeros from that position so often that you're still kind of rolling out 2. And because it's tight end premium, there's going to be a lot of weeks where, or maybe not a lot of weeks, but enough weeks where that second or tight end might be able to sneak into your flex for you. So by giving yourself a 3rd guy that isn't too cheap, like trying to get 3 before the 14th round, you're gonna kind of maximize your chances of getting one of those guys into your flex spot sometimes.
And maybe we can talk about some of those players after we get our second tight end. I don't necessarily want to talk about which tight ends we want to be targeting, but there are plenty of names down here in kind of the middle tier that are at least appealing in some regard, especially if you know that you're going to be building a stable of multiple guys. Let's take a quick break here. Let's talk about what happens when you sign up for a 4for4 subscription. If you want to do one of these FFPC drafts, viewers, this is an easy way to get a free draft. Go sign up at 4for4.com, pick out whatever subscription works best for you and your plan, whether it be the season-long content, the redraft content, or the DFS content. We have golf and NBA content as well now. Whatever you sign up for, you're going to get a coupon to use here at the FFPC. You can draft one of these Superflex best balls. You can draft a regular one quarterback best ball. It's a really great way to get practice for your managed leagues, which will be drafting probably closer to August and Labor Day. But yeah, head over to 4for4.com, sign up, and you'll get a chance to do one of these drafts on us. It's a really nice opportunity. The content we have at the site is awesome. TJ, is there anything in particular you want to highlight that's going on at 4for4 lately?
Yeah, I mean, since we are in the midst of FFPC draft here, we've just been really hammering the best ball content. We have a ton of FFPC specific content that looks at win rates. We have a lot of data on tournaments. FFPC is running a best ball tournament. That's actually a really fantastic structure and relatively small, at least in player pool size compared to some of the other tournaments in the industry. So I've been working on that. Jennifer Akins has been working on that. Chris Allen has been working on that. There's just a lot of really awesome best ball stuff. We just had a team map episode, the most accurate podcast, where we brought on Mike Leone from Establish the Run to talk about some running back specific strategy in best ball, some of the roster construction things we've been talking about here already. So if you're watching this, probably interested in best ball. So I would check that out for sure.
Yeah, Leone knows his stuff. That's got to be a good episode. I didn't realize you guys dropped that this week, so I'll be listening to that probably tomorrow when I'm taking the kid to daycare. Coming back to us here in the 5th round, I'm impressed to see these two drafters at the top not draft any quarterbacks or tight ends. It's Superflex's tight end premium, and these people are saying, no, thank you. Not interested. We'll see how bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it works out for him. But I do like the idea of kind of zigging when people zag, trying to get leverage at positions that other people might be ignoring. We certainly are ignoring running back. We're potentially getting punished by these other drafters.
The problem is, I mean, I like leaning into your strengths. I think if you're, like you said, zigging when everyone else is zagging, if a draft is going a certain way, you could beat the field, not trying to outdraft them. Like if you're trying to go blow for blow and everybody's drafting quarterbacks, you're going to get the best quarterback. But if you're ignoring running backs like we are, there's still a relatively big pool of them to pick from, right? There's supply. If you're punting quarterback in a Superflex league, you run out of options really fast. You don't have that luxury. Yeah, so that's the issue there.
So we're coming up here again. I've got running backs in the queue now because that's the position that we've waited on. Now we can kind of see who the top guys according to the FFPC are. We're not necessarily going to agree with these rankings, but this is a good kind of snapshot of what's available. I don't think we're taking a third QB this early, but maybe one of these names stands out to you and you'll think otherwise. But here we go. What do you say?
A lot of the guys that I like here as my RB1, I think probably make it back to us at 6.03 with only 4 picks between us. I don't think you need to force a guy here just because you don't have a running back yet. And there are some fantastic wide receiver options still available. So I think with Allen Robinson still on the board, I go A-Rob here just because I love him with Justin Fields. He has a real quarterback, and we come back with our RB1 at 6.03.
All right, there we go. Allen Robinson, welcome to the team. Dylan said what's up in the chat. What's up, Dylan? And Jen Akins did say hi earlier. Hi, Jen. Good to see you.
What's up, Jen?
Thanks for hanging out. So yeah, you're thinking running back with the next pick. That does make sense. We can't wait forever. I mean, just the way we're scolding other drafters for not addressing quarterback, like they're probably looking at us and be like, "Well, you don't have any running backs, dummies." So
yeah, I just interestingly enough ran a best ball filter, and what we saw last year was that teams with what we call the hyper fragile strategy, the 4 running backs, Let's look at these running backs here. We got Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, Miles Gaskin, and Mike Davis. These are a couple of guys that I've typically been passing on, but it's because a lot of them are gone before the 6th round. I think you probably go. I don't love Jacobs or Etienne because I think they are more likely to be in timeshare situations than Gaskin or Davis. I'm buying when I'm kind of in a coin flip situation, I'm buying the offense more than the players. So I actually like Gaskin more than Davis here.
I knew where you're going to go as soon as you said you like the offense. So let's make Gaskin the pick, and then why don't you tell us what you like about that Miami Dolphins offense?
I mean, they're just trending in the right direction. We already saw Gaskin on a per game basis put up top 12 numbers last year, and Tua going into his 2nd year obviously didn't have a full season as a starter last year, but came in about halfway through and he was decent. But we see a lot of quarterbacks make the 2nd year leap, and they've put a lot of playmakers around him, specifically Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller. Will Fuller, one of the most efficient wide receivers in recent history. Especially in terms of fantasy points and just on a offense that produces fantasy points. Already had Devontae Parker there last year. We saw Devontae Parker's target share really spike with Tua last year. They clearly had a connection, although it did coincide with a couple injuries. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Grain of salt for sure.
And then Mike Gesicki, one of the best young tight ends in the league. So overall, just an efficient offense that I think an offense that's going to take a really big leap and going to be relatively pass heavy. All of that seems like, well, what the hell does that have to do with a running back? Running backs and efficient offenses just score more because they have more scoring opportunities.
Or touchdown opportunities. Yep.
Yeah. So I just like the way Miami's training. I want pieces of the offense whenever I can get them. I do believe Tua went off the board, but when we took our 2nd quarterback, when we took Aaron Rodgers, I was kind of looking down like, is Tua going to be available later? But since it's Superflex, it's not one that I really wanted to gamble on. But Tua's a guy I've been targeting a lot. The Dolphins are a team I've been targeting a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of those offenses where you'd rather be a year early than a year late. You were with the Bills last year, a great example of kind of buying into an offense based upon some positive trends from the previous season and through the offseason. So great call there. Dylan's also shouting you out here for the Best Ball Mania data you've been digging into. And I'm curious, do you feel like your brain gets a little scrambled by that tournament mentality relative to a draft like this, where we're just trying to get 12th or first place out of 12 teams? Like, looking at the roster we've drafted so far, do you think that maybe this has more of a tournament lean than it should based upon kind of like maybe I mean, bias isn't the right word, but like some sort of carryover from drafting so much and studying so much of the tournament setting?
In short, no. The primary focus of my tournament teams, the first round is to win your 12-team league. And that's really what I've been looking at is teams that advanced or teams that finished with the top 10% score. Not looking at these outlier teams, not looking at teams that won the tournament or made it to the final round, not narrowing it down that far. Teams that won their league. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Win our league or be top 3, depending on the payout structure and depending on what site you're looking at. We do have multi-year data for some of these things. So some of these best ball truths do hold across sites, across multiple years. The big ones being roster construction and leaning into the strengths and weaknesses of your team. Now, Superflex and tight end premium obviously throws wrench in these things, but also I would argue kind of strengthens kind of what we're doing here. It looks like we ignored running back, but at the same time, when else is Myles Gaskin available in the 6th round? Go to any other best ball league, and that's never going to happen. So it kind of like even adds more to kind of those concepts that we're talking about. Like when you can get a Myles Gaskin this late, then loading up on these other positions, I feel like makes your team even better.
And that is the argument to the early round quarterbacks, is because that thirst doesn't just apply to you drafting your own team, it applies to all the other teams. All these other positions get pushed down. So you're seeing Myles Gaskin in the 6th round. You're seeing Robert Woods in the 6th round. Like, these players typically are not available in this range, and it's all because the quarterbacks are driving up the board, pushing these other players down. And you have to wrap your brain around that. The wide receivers are definitely the position that gets dinged the most. But with that said, like where we took Devontae in the 4th round, like give me that all day, every time, especially when we get to stack him with Rodgers. Allen Robinson there in the 5th round. You might have been able to talk me into a running back there instead of him, but I can't. I mean, that's, again, when is Allen Robinson available in the 5th round? It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So really curious to see what running backs we do end up with here, because that's going to dictate generally like how I feel about this team, right? Like, because I love the way we've started. I love the players we have, but we do have that one positional weakness right now that we need to address. And we have a whole draft to do it, but, we have to pick our spots and do it appropriately.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. One of the main ones being when it's PPR, you can be a little more confident in your later round picks. The J.D. McKissick, Tariq Cohen types, you're going to get a boost compared to leagues that are half PPR. That's really going to carry them and help with those late round builds. So we are going to be really heavily targeting. Obviously, you still want the guys that have a ton of upside, the guys that not necessarily handcuffs, but guys with upside if they have some playing time and there's an injury in front of them, or if they even usurp the starter. But also, pass catching backs are very important. And on top of that, I think where, like you talked about, like what are we going to do with these running backs? One thing I think people need to be very cognizant of if they are playing best ball, if they haven't played a ton of best ball, we are really focused on this roster construction thing, right? So we know we've pretty much cornered quarterback and tight end. We're very comfortable there, and we know how many players we're targeting each position. So we've really set ourselves up to where we're not backed into a corner at any pick. Now we could kind of ping pong between quarterback and wide receiver. Running back and wide receiver, however we see fit for quite a few rounds here. And I think that's a really good position to be in. You don't feel like you have to take a tight end or a quarterback with your next pick, where I think looking at the draft board, some of these guys are probably going to pass on some players they really like because they might not have a tight end or quarterback yet.
So we're a few picks away here, and we're starting to see a run on the mid-tier tight ends. Noah Fant just went. I think we missed on Goddard, and Mark Andrews in the 5th round is a nice one. Shout out to that drafter. That's a nice value. But yeah, I still have the running backs lined up here in the queue. This is just how they're ranked in FFPC, not necessarily the order we'll draft them. We could think about a second tight end here. I don't think we have to pick one, especially, again, because we have another pick coming up so soon after this next one. So I think it does come down to me to running back, another wide receiver, still a lot of great options here. And then maybe a third quarterback as well. That's another option here if we want to get one of these last few kind of locked-in starters. I don't know how much you value that here in a Superflex, and it might be another situation where we wait until the next round to make that decision, because one of these drafters behind us already has 3 QBs. If they want to take 4 and screw us, like I don't mind that. I don't actually think that hurts us as much as it hurts them, like the opportunity cost they're giving up. So we're on deck now. Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp just missed. I was hoping Lockett would make it to us so we could stack him with Russell Wilson. That is not the case. So we got our work cut out for us. What are you thinking?
In short, when we invest crazy heavily in the onesie positions, I'm willing to gamble pretty hard there. So I think I'm probably waiting on quarterback and tight end, even through these next 2 picks, and see what happens in 9 and 10. So it's kind of between a running back and wide receiver here for me. I think I'm comfortable with a lot of these running backs as my RB2 right now, and we have a pretty sharp tier drop coming in wide receiver here pretty soon. So I like just leaning into one of our strengths, which is wide receiver, and going Julio here.
Going with Julio, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, none of these running backs really stand out to me among the crowd, and so I see why we would want to pass on them here and just wait till the next round. The only exception would be if we felt the need to double tap the position.
Draft earlier? Did you draft it?
I clicked the button. Maybe I just need to refresh. The draft room does hang up on me at least once a stream, so we were overdue. So hopefully once that is back, we will.
Looks like you gave us ATN on auto pick.
No, I clicked draft Julio. How dare you? Well, that changes things. These are the joys of drafting in a live room without a commissioner. Apologies to you for not getting Julio. Maybe he'll make it back to us.
He might make it back to us. And really, I mean, like I said, it was going to be like kind of a ping pong here where I went wide Julio and then running back.
Yeah, but was Etienne going to be the guy? We don't necessarily have to give up who we wanted, but yeah, that's not great.
No, but I mean, again, it kind of just comes down to roster construction and like your build. So again, we're not dealing in perfect projections, right? I think that running back is kind of like running back tiers there. So I mean, I would take a running back in that tier. It probably would have been James. Did Julio make it back to us anyway?
He just got sniped. It figures. We are live streaming and talking about which players we like, so that's not happening. But still a lot of good wide receivers here.
I love Deontay just for the PPR value because his target share is I think going to be pretty high when he's completely healthy. Even though the season-long target share doesn't show, when he's on the field, he's had some pretty high target shares. But I mean, that tier of running backs, it probably would have been James Conner or Gus Edwards.
Okay.
But all those guys are kind of the same, right? They're kind of ambiguous running back situations.
Honestly, one of those two guys could make it back to us in the next round even. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that, but it's possible. Could make it back
to us. And all three are kind of the presumed ones, even though they're going later, except for Gus Edwards. Like, people are drafting Chase Edmonds like he's the one, but I actually think James Conner is going to end up with at least more carries than him. ATN is the presumed one, I think, the way they've been talking, but he's going to be getting a lot of reception. So, I mean, none of us are projecting perfectly, right? So as long as we're drafting in tiers, that's why I'm really paying attention to these roster construction type builds and how I'm planning on how many players I'm planning on getting each position. So, yeah, it sucks that we got auto drafted, but I mean, it still kind of fits into the build that we were thinking about anyway.
How are you approaching that Jacksonville offense? Because Etienne, James Robinson, it's like that's a backfield I kind of don't want any part of because it's so nebulous. But, you know, our buddy JJ Zacharyson always talks about how those are often the running backs you want to be targeting because that uncertainty drives down the value. It presents, value for you to gain from the later or middle rounds. And so I see the upside. But at the same time, like I'm either drafting running backs earlier and kind of avoiding Etienne in this range, or I'm, picking a player who I feel has a more solidified role or is in an offense that I trust more. I'm looking at the running backs who are available here, like the Niners guys, like Mostert and Trey Sermon. I don't know which one of them is going to be necessarily the lead back in San Francisco, but I trust that offense a lot more than I trust the Jacksonville offense. So I'm much more likely to take one of those players over Etienne. I think Gus Edwards and James Conner, same sort of deal, right? Like we like the rushing offense for Baltimore. That's why we're interested in Gus Edwards. We like the Arizona offense in general. That's why we're interested in James Conner. With the Jaguars, like, yeah, they have a new quarterback and he was the number one pick in the draft. They should be better this year than they were last year, but I don't trust it. I just don't. Like, what do you think about this offense and, how are you parsing it within the context of your own drafting?
Yeah, I mean, to like JJ's point, like I'm a firm believer in buy the cheap guy in ambiguous situations, but especially in backfields, we care about how good that offense is, and I don't think Jaguars are going to be a good offense yet. Trevor Lawrence is obviously a rookie, and the problem, their wide receivers and running backs are all very ambiguous. I mean, that kind of means they don't have any great weapons, right? If they had a great players, it wouldn't be ambiguous. We would know who the hell is going to be getting the ball. So they're still a team with the low projected win total. They're still a team projected for not a lot of points. And people are the counter to that is going to be, well, they had a top 6 or 7 running back last year without being good. Well, yeah, that running back led the league in running back touch share by a huge margin. He had like 90% of the backfield work. That's not exaggerating. He had like about 90% of the backfield work, which was number one in the league by a huge margin. That's not going to happen this year with ATN. So you're getting some kind of share. Whether you think it's 70-30, 60-40, whatever, 50-50, it doesn't matter what you think it is. It's probably not going to be enough to make them great because they're probably not going to score a ton of touchdowns. Like they might increase their touchdowns by some percentage, but I don't think they're going to be like a top 10 scoring offense by any means.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like these drafters who are down at the front end of the draft order. At the last turn, the number one drafter took Daniel Jones, Ben Roethlisberger back-to-back. Considering the all running back and wide receiver start there, how do you like that quarterback pairing matched up with the rest of that team? Like both risky guys, but when you wait this long, this is kind of what you get.
Yeah, you just don't have a lot of options. I don't love either of those guys with Cam Newton still there, even though Cam Newton is going to be fighting for like a starting job. When you're that weak at a position already, you want some upside, and Cam's going to rush a ton. Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know if he can throw the ball 30 yards anymore. And Daniel Jones, he has some upside. I actually wrote about the Giants' offense as one that can have some positive regression, but maybe they're just really bad too. Ben Roethlisberger, I'm worried about him throwing deep. I think they'll throw a lot. I think Deontay and Juju will be fine. I think Claypool could be in trouble. Like there was a play towards the end of the season last year. I think it was against Bengals on Monday night, and Ben stepped up in the pocket, and I think it was Claypool got behind the defense and he did the wave thing, like go deeper and put his whole body into it, and not exaggerating, came up about 10 yards short, and it was one of the funniest plays I've ever seen football. And I was like, oof.
I have to believe he's going to be healthier this year than last year. I know he's a year older.
Yeah, he's 48 years old.
Approximate?
Yeah.
Give or take?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that I don't understand is how we can be excited about drafting Deontay Johnson and not think that Roethlisberger is at least going to be serviceable. And I understand Deontay Johnson, what we like about him is that he operates in those short and intermediate areas, to the places where Roethlisberger can still throw the ball. But that offense could be good enough doing that to where Roethlisberger at least is a fine placeholder. And again, if you're waiting that long to draft your quarterbacks and you're stacking up McCaffrey, Najee Harris, David Montgomery, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, like theoretically you're telling yourself that those players are going to carry you and that your quarterbacks just kind of need to do okay. Maybe best ball smooths it out a little bit too. You get the best weeks from Jones, the best weeks from Roethlisberger. The duds don't hurt you quite as much. But yeah, actually, now that I mention it, like stacking Najee Harris with Ben Roethlisberger, I'm not a huge fan of that. Like that seems like a bit of a black hole too, because you're capping your upside to some extent by pairing the runner with the passer. Anyway, I want to crap on these other teams. I'm just trying to talk through what the thought process is, like what you're trying to do with these picks.
No, maybe they had a plan because they came right back with Claypool, so maybe they have a read on the Steelers. The problem is Superflex just really exacerbates the strength of the quarterback. A lot of these running backs that we were looking at before make it back, and with us being weak, I think we want to kind of somewhat solidify.
Yeah, this feels like a position where we could double tap or take a running back and a tight end, a running back, a running back, a quarterback. I don't think we have to take a wide receiver at this point, but which running back do you like?
How much time do we have? 38 seconds. I haven't taken a ton of Gus, just because there are kind of like three running backs in that field. I've taken a lot of Tony Pollard and James Conner in these spots. I think James Conner probably has more standalone value. So with a weakish running back core, I think Conner's the pick here, and Pollard is more as like Conner's the pick. So you can put it in.
We got Conner.
Yeah, but Pollard I think does have some standalone value, but he obviously does run the risk of just not having enough to make a lot of your weeks in best ball if Zeke goes back to a 75 to 80% touch share, which is very possible. Also could be closer to like 65-35 or 60-40, which we saw kind of down the stretch last year. But that's TBD, where I think Connors has a ton of standalone value with some touchdown upside there.
So looking at some of the other positions that are available, I had wide receivers up. I'm pulling up QBs now. The top of the ranks are Winston, Goff, Taysom Hill, Teddy Bridgewater, Deshaun Watson, Mac Jones. Looking at tight ends, Evan Ingram, Mike Gesicki, Robert Tonyan, Irv Smith, Anthony Firkser, Jonnu Smith. I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is the range where if you wait on tight end, you kind of need at least two of the players from this group, and preferably maybe even one from a little bit higher. And then going back to wide receiver, some potential wide receiver ones for their team, but for the most part, you're looking at wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 types. So yeah, we're on deck here. Where's your brain taking you, TJ?
I think we're probably going to see a pretty big run on tight end here. I'd rather start the run than chase the run. That would probably leave us with a 2 tight end build, which is really my goal here. The only thing we have to be cognizant of is our bye weeks. If we're going to go with 2, we have George Kittle with a week 6 bye, so we want to make sure none of these tight ends have a week 6 bye. Already talked about Miami offense that I'm targeting a lot. I don't think I need to go crazy stack with Rodgers with Tanyan. I'm not going to target Ingram, even though I like him as a regression candidate. So I'm going to pair Gesicki here with our earlier running back pick of Gaskin.
Awesome. Yeah, I like it. I'd like that now we are solidified in tight end. It's kind of a position we don't really have to think about. With that said, if we see enough depletion of the other positions, is there a world in which you would take a tight end 3 in this build? Or do you think because of the Kittle pick, because of the Gesicki pick, you really can't spend any more draft picks on that position? Everything else needs to be allocated to the other positions. Like, how flexible are you when it comes to, those sorts of roster construction considerations in the very late rounds, when maybe you look at everyone who's available and you might just say, well, a tight end actually is the best value here?
No, it makes a lot of sense. When I invest, this is still like a somewhat significant investment in your tight end too. If it wasn't tight end premium, if I wasn't concerned about a crazy tight end run, I probably would have gambled a little bit. But I think we could, if we didn't take one there, we could really get left behind. So when I invest that early in my first tight end and still take another tight end in the first 10 rounds, I just don't see myself taking a third one, no matter who falls. Remember, we have 2 flex in this format. So running back and wide receiver can both be a flex, obviously, and 2 flex positions, I believe, right? Superflex and a flex, right?
That's right. So there's one regular flex and there's one super flex.
So there is a lot of options of who can make it into your flex. So what you're really trying to do is, I think this is where people really get lost in best ball and not understanding how points come in best ball. Is your best ball comes from volume, especially with your pass catchers. Now, we've already invested so much in our tight ends that if we just start pounding these wide receivers and then get our running back up to 6, like we said, the best ball format, the optimization is really going to take care of who makes it into our lineup and who makes it into our flexes. And the lower end wide receivers are the guys that are most likely to do that. Lower end, super low end tight ends and super low end running backs just aren't going to happen that often. I mean, if a Robert Tonyan falls down like 3 more rounds,
right.
Sure.
Especially because we're stacking him in that case. That's the main differentiator there, right? We have Rodgers, so that's more appealing. But at that point, then the Gesicki pick becomes a pick we shouldn't have made, right? Like, if Tanyan does last that long, then we kind of screwed up by taking Gesicki as early as we did.
Yeah. But I mean, I just, like, if he's there around 13, that's what I'm thinking about, or 14. But with so many, especially wide receivers that are just viable options, like so many wide receivers, there's most teams have 3 wide receivers on the field most of the time. There's just a lot of guys that could put up points at any time. I mean, we saw like one of the big weeks towards the end of the season last year, league winners in best ball, a lot of KJ Hamler shares last year. So like these 3rd, 4th, sometimes 5th wide receiver guys are guys that are just gonna make it into your lineups a lot more often than I don't know, a Cole Kmet or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. But again, like if you have the quarterback, especially in Superflex, that's when like if you have Justin Fields, maybe that's where Cole Kmet becomes more appealing. We got Dylan dapping up the drafter in the 3 spot here, who landed Mahomes at 3, which is, I mean, feels like good value, at least relative to the format. Then got Zeke, Akers, Lance, Michael Thomas, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Amari Cooper, Michael Carter, Kenny Galladay, Jonnu Smith. Can't argue. That's a good-looking team. Waited on tight end, got Jonnu. I don't hate that. I'm going to have to probably draft 3 tight ends, but again, this is the range where that can happen. What do you think about this squad from the 3 spot?
I like it a lot. I think with the Mahomes pick at 3, you could probably wait a little bit longer. I mean, we still saw, Jameis, Cam, Jared Goff, those type of quarterbacks. like Fitzpatrick, sure, him and Trey Lance might kind of ping pong for that quarterback 2 spot. I think I'd probably want to beef up my pass catchers or running backs a little bit more in that spot specifically. But no, that's a really good team. I mean, you're if he wants to, if he's listening, he might take my advice, but whatever. I mean, he can get away with not taking another running back with this build and just hammer the pass catchers. I mean, for him and actually for that whole kind of group in 1 through 3, I ran a quick little query. We were talking about tight ends earlier. Superflex, Slim last year, teams that didn't take their tight end until their tight end went until the 8th round, but took their tight end 3 before round 16. Teams with 6 running backs. 13.6% win rate. Your expected win rate in a 12-team best ball league is 8.3%. Just random, you have 8.3% chance of winning. Almost a 14% win rate for teams that took 3 tight ends between rounds 8 and 16. So again, if you're going to wait on tight end, don't wait super late. Take 3 guys in those I think you still kind of consider that the middle-ish rounds and then 1 kind of late, but not super, super late. So they can still put something together that's pretty nice.
Yeah, plenty of options left here. And kind of going to the draft in the 1 spot, doing the same sort of thing, taking Ingram and Tanyan back-to-back, that looks good to me too. And that really makes up for waiting on it by double-tapping the position like that. Did the same thing with quarterbacks earlier. I don't necessarily love all the players specifically taken, but this sort of structure makes a lot of sense to me, and so I do appreciate that. We're coming back up here pretty soon. I'm going to go back to the draft board. We've got the running backs at the top of the queue kind of got depleted here, so I might have to fill that back up. I'm going to pull up quarterbacks just to think about, do we want any of these guys as our QB3? I don't know if I'm ready to go there. This is a case where because we paid up early for quarterback, I don't feel a strong pull to go out and plant my flag on Taysom Hill or Teddy Bridgewater or Mac Jones or Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Yeah.
Interestingly, I mean, one thing that we do, looking at the teams that if we were going to take a quarterback, we have a team between us with 2 quarterbacks early and another one that already took 4. So if we did want to take a quarterback, we probably could not take him and pick 11. I don't want any of those guys. I want to look at the running backs, wide receivers. We're still relative, we started really late at running back, so I'm probably favoring a running back here, but I want to see who the wide receivers are. Darrell Henderson's the guy that's standing out to me right now. I like a lot of the receivers, but don't love them. Darrell Henderson's my pick here.
Okay, yeah, we're going to take Hendy. I like it. You're right. There's not a big differentiator here among the wide receivers. I like plenty of these players. But if you ask me to, again, say, this one is clearly one that I like more than the others, I'm not really ready to do that. I'm going to put a few more running backs in the queue here. Last one we have there is A.J. Dillon. And again, this isn't the order in which we would draft the players if you're watching this at home. This is just to help us look at 2 positions at the same time, and then we'll make an informed decision based upon that. I talk about process of these online drafts sometimes on the stream, TJ. If this were just you drafting by yourself without, broadcasting it to the world, what is your process for what players go in the queue? Is it just kind of like a loose approximation of the order in which you like players? Or do you kind of frame it more like this, where you put one position in the queue heavily and then you kind of compare? What's your process when you're navigating one of these things on your own?
Well, the first thing, if you're somewhere where you can upload your own projections, that should be the first thing you're doing. I'll kind of start without players in my queue, and then I will start thinking about how my early rounds have went as far as the draft flow. Having a week at running back, week at wide receiver, week at tight end. If I'm really weak at one of those positions, I'm going to start queuing up guys that I've done enough drafts where. All right, I want to look at the wide receivers real quick. I think this is pretty easy for me. I think Brandon Cooks is one of the most underrated wide receivers in every format this year. So Brandon Cooks is my wide receiver 4 here is a pretty easy pick for me. I know we don't know about the situation in Houston. We don't know what's up with Deshaun Watson. I just saw something that said he might not be playing until 2023 with just the case, with the way the NFL handles these type of legal situations and how long it might take for a case to start for him. but I mean, Brandon Cooks is a beast, and I mean, wide receiver 4 on your team, I think he can still be like a 1,000-yard guy and looking to a few touchdowns. Back to your question. If you're doing enough best ball leagues, you kind of get an idea of the guys you're targeting based on if you have kind of a 0 running back team, who are these guys that you want? We talked about the coin flip between like a Tony Pollard and a James Conner type. Or an anchor running back team, you're going to be more willing to take a Pollard over a Conner. So after those first few rounds, once I know how it started, then I'll kind of start clicking like, okay, I'm going to fill out my running back roster this way. These are the guys I've drafted a lot. Another thing that I'm thinking about is my stacking options. If I started with I actually wanted to talk about this earlier. We talked about that Gesicki pick. If I don't take a tight end there, one of the guys that I would have favored is Gerald Everett, not because I have him projected higher than some of the other guys, but I already have Russell Wilson. So if I have Everett and Blake Jarwin projected kind of close, people might say, well, Jarwin's in the better offense. He has more upside. Well, my team has more upside if I pair Everett with Russell Wilson, regardless of who you think is projected higher. So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about. Like those are the things that are dictating my queue and my draft. Like I'm kind of always have a stacking option in the back of my head, especially if I'm investing this high in quarterbacks, whether it be Superflex or just a regular best ball league. Like you double down on your investment. If you're going to win the league, you need things to go right anyway, right? If Russell Wilson has a crap season, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm taking on a ton of risk by taking Russell Wilson with his pass catchers. Well, guess what? If you spend a first-round draft pick on Russell Wilson, it sucks, your team's going to suck anyway. So you might as well double down on the good side. And that kind of plays into, like, are you playing a lot of best ball leagues? If you're playing one $250 best ball league and that's all your best balls for the season, sure, maybe you don't want that kind of risk. If you're playing 100, and this goes back to a point you made earlier, like we might see a roster construction and say, I like that construction, I like what they did, I don't love the players that they filled their position with. Well, if that guy if he's on his 150th draft, he might not like the players either. But if you're playing that many leagues, exactly, you need to start taking players that you don't necessarily like, right? Especially in like the earlier rounds. Like even if you don't love Austin Eckler, if you're 100 drafts in, if you don't only take him 3 times, like you are really exposing yourself to some downside if Austin Eckler has
top 5 RB season,
top 2 RB season, and you only have 2% of them. Now your portfolio is just in shambles. So you want to give yourself some outs, and a lot of those outs are early round guys that you're often passing on.
It's one of the things I love about doing these streams with different people is kind of seeing where they want to put their exposure, like on my behalf, essentially. Like I am not really an Aaron Rodgers guy. I have been worried about him playing this year. Maybe that's unfounded, especially with this country club re-up that I've heard about today. That's awesome news. But James Conner, another one where I've been a Chase Edmonds guy to this point in the offseason. So it's about time that I flipped and started taking the other side of that backfield. And getting back to that point you made about stacking, that's something where you can use your queue and you can kind of plan ahead a little bit, right? Like knowing that we have Russell Wilson, knowing that Gerald Everett might fit our team construction. Like maybe we should have considered that when we thought about Gesicki and said, you know what, we're not going to take Gesicki here. We're going to take another running back, another wide receiver. Maybe that's where we take our QB3. That could have been Jared Goff. I'm glad it wasn't, but it could have been. And then you say, okay, I'm going to lean into ADP. ADP tells me that Gerald Everett is going to be available 2, 3, 4 rounds later. And so I don't need to take a tight end here because I know I can take Gerald Everett and it'll, kind of match this upside profile of Russell Wilson as my first round pick. So that's another way that, like you said, the Q and ADP are your friends in terms of planning out your draft ahead of time, not necessarily knowing exactly who you're going to pick, but knowing who your options are when relative to the market. And so, and you keep that in mind.
Yeah, and in retrospect, like to kind of counter what you said, like Gerald Everett didn't end up being available when it came all the way back to us.
Right.
But the reason that we took Gesicki, the process in the first place was we saw this huge chunk of teams in the front 3 that didn't have any tight
Needed
end,
the
one
position.
that needed the position. So we were pretty confident that there was going to be a tight end run. We saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go off before it came back to us. One of those guys wasn't Everett, but he was the next one taken after that. So he very well could have fallen into that group. So there was no guarantee that Everett was even going to make it back to us. So in that position, might as well take the guy that you like, who happened to be second at that point.
How deep do you go with that reading the room stuff, though? Like, are there times when you will pass on a player specifically because you know it's better for you to stack that player, where it's better for other drafters to be stacking other, players at the same position? Like, maybe, you don't expect someone to value someone like Gerald Everett because they don't have Russell Wilson like we do. Is that going too deep? Is that a little too galaxy brain, trying to read the room like that? Like, I think in general it probably is, because you don't know who the hell you're drafting with. It'd be different if it's like your buddies in the same 12-team league you've been playing for, the past 20 years or whatever. But something like this with a bunch of random people online, you don't really have any idea what people value, how they're going to try to draft. But does that question make sense? Like, are you trying to game theory it out that deep?
No, really. It's I'm very rarely going past positional need. And again, like Everett's kind of in that positional need. It's similar to something at the poker table. Like, I don't assume anybody is thinking, unless you're at some crazy high stakes table. If I'm playing a 1-2 table, I don't assume that anybody's really thinking beyond what cards are in their hand until they show me otherwise. It's kind of the same in lower stakes fantasy football. I think it can be dangerous to assume that people are looking at, I have this stack, this player has this stack, so this player will come back to me later. Like, until a name or you've seen somebody in 100 drafts, like, I'm really kind of just looking at team need and kind of measuring out positions, how many positions will be there.
So what does our team need right now?
Well,
roster's down here.
A quarterback 3 would be nice, but it's got so thin now where I think we just completely punt the quarterback 3, and we keep building up our running backs and wide receivers.
Yeah, we still want to draft 2 more running backs. We have 4 to this point. We want to end up at 6. We have 4 wide receivers, but the wide receivers we have are pretty darn good, especially from a volume perspective. So I feel really comfortable there. Our tight ends are locked in. Quarterbacks are taken care of. Yeah, and you're right. Like, none of these quarterbacks really calls my name. I think Mac Jones and Drew Lock are probably the 2 that have the clearest path to being a full-time starter. But let's pull up wide receivers and running backs together here. I think that's where we're going to land, right?
Yeah, for sure. So there's still a lot of wide receivers that are going to see the field. Running back is going to get really thin really fast. I think a lot of people like Alexander Madison in this spot. I like Madison as like my 5th or 6th running back. If I start running back heavy, he's kind of a pure handcuff. He doesn't have a lot of standalone value. Our team needs some standalone value with the late running back start. So it's between Tariq Cohen and James White for me. I don't love the Patriots offense, especially with them drafting Ramondre Stevenson. So it's Tariq Cohen here for me.
Okay. More Bears. 2 Bears on the same squad. I don't know how I feel about that, but here we go.
They have they're going to be great with Justin Fields. But, I mean, they're 2 guys that are going to catch a lot of balls. And, again, it's best ball. So when it's going to optimize for us, right? Yeah, the spike weeks are going to hit. I think Allen Robinson he's going to be great no matter what. He's kind of proven that. He's going to be a top 10, top 12 target share guy at least, and that volume is going to translate to full PPR points. And Tariq Cohen, even though this isn't a situation where I look like I'm really stacking the Bears offense. I mean, I got guys that catch a lot of balls. Tariq Cohen got hurt last year, and people forget that he's just been a complete target monster when he's on the field.
So we're on deck again here. Is this a situation where you would double tap running back, or do you want to go back to the wide receiver ranks? Do we want to take a stab at one of these QBs?
No,
you got a strong lean in any particular direction here? Yeah,
I don't think we need to double tap running back here. I think our 6th running back is a guy that he doesn't have to be a slam dunk going to see the field type guy. I like buying pieces of the offense. We have 3 Buffalo wide receivers available. It's an offense that is really cheap to get exposure to, and they're obviously going to be one of the highest scoring teams. Got Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, and Emmanuel Sanders. I don't like receiver switching teams, especially an undefined role, which is Emmanuel Sanders. Cole Beasley was a target hog last year, but I like the young guy here. I like Gabriel Davis with John Brown out of the mix. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Gabriel Davis. That's not a pick I would have made here. Again, kind of just showing where my lean is. But this is kind of like the same argument for the nebulous running backfields. You can kind of make the same argument for some of these wide receiver groups. Like, we know Stephon Diggs is the number one for Buffalo. We don't necessarily know who their number two is, and maybe it's Gabriel Davis, right? That's the argument we're essentially making with that pick.
Yeah, maybe it's Gabriel Davis, or he's just in a great offense. Yeah, we don't know who it is. Maybe they don't have a clear number two. These guys ping pong with each other. I think we kind of know what Cole Beasley is, right? Like, last year was his career year, in what the ninth year of his career. And now Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis both there. I don't think he repeats there. Emmanuel Sanders are also, again, switching teams again. In an undefined role has traditionally been pretty bad for wide receivers. I mean, I like Gabriel Davis a lot. I just like the Bills' offense. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to you.
It's not to me, no.
But they're one of the few teams that is projected for a lot of wins, a lot of points, but don't have a lot of players being drafted very high. They got Diggs and Josh Allen, and then after that, no one's really taking shots at any of their other guys very early. So let me get exposure to cheap guys on a fantastic offense.
How much do you care about, like, in-division stacks? Is that something you're looking at? Because we've drafted a couple Dolphins already. Now we're talking about wanting to get a piece of the Bills' offense. I mean, clearly you just want the Bills' offense because you think it's going to be a good offense. But could you take that a step further and say, another reason I like this is because these teams are going to play each other. There might be some shootout potential. I think that maybe you could make that argument more strongly in, like, a best ball tournament setting, especially looking at those week 16, week 17 matchups, things like that. But in a standalone league like this, is that something that even crosses your mind?
I was gonna say the tournament thing where I'm looking at the last few weeks, team stacks, like those tournaments where you're advancing rounds. You need to win in week 14 or 15 or 16, whatever it is, depending on the tournament structure you're playing. I think it's important to look at those for possible game stacks. I mean, there is something to be said for teams that are going to play each other twice a year and some upside. But over the course of the season, the most voluminous players are probably going to put up the best numbers, at least, at your volume positions. Your quarterback is your efficiency position, but now rushing volume is a thing too. But, over the course of the entire best ball season, your high volume guys are the guys that are going to score your points. I haven't put a ton of thought into it. I've talked about divisions like the NFC West. I think is going to be a nice shootout division. So a lot of options to score points there. We've seen it in the past with the NFC South just being insane for a few years with the Falcons. The Falcons and the Saints and having some crazy battles specifically, and even the Bucks a couple of years ago. But
Jameis.
But I'm not like necessarily like targeting divisions. I think that's probably going a little too far. I mean, there are some matchup things that I've thought about. I've thought about knocking down guys like DK specifically because he has just been shut down by Jalen Ramsey twice a year for the past 2 years. That's like, that is a thought. There's a chance you're just getting a straight up 0 from a second round pick. But for the most part, I'm just trying to take high volume guys as much as possible.
I think you can make those sorts of arguments, but again, it really, in that case, it depends on when the matchups are and how much that actually affects you. Because if DK gets shut down in I actually don't know when he's playing the Rams, but let's say it's like week 6 and week 10, like, okay, but what's he doing the rest of the weeks, right? Is he still being DK Metcalf those other weeks? Like, that's fine. Like, that's what you're drafting him for. But again, if you go back to that kind of tournament setting, that really high echelon, upper 1% type of finish within a given week relative to a smaller, more condensed field, like then I think you could maybe start talking yourself into that stuff if those matchups occur in those most important weeks. But frankly, I'm with you. I kind of just think, how do I win this league? Like, worry about the overall stuff after the fact. Like, hope that stuff works out in my favor to some extent. And maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe that's just too much of like a hedging or like floor-based mentality for me. But yeah, I don't know. Like I asked you, like, does all the tournament stuff bleed into your approach to this draft? I would definitely have the opposite problem where all of my standalone league experience hurts me in the tournament setting. I've had this problem in DFS at times. I haven't done well in the best ball tournaments for the most part. I've done a little bit better at recalibrating, thanks to fantasy baseball. In fact, like that's the way I got there was kind of wrapping my brain around some of those overall competitions. But this is a fantasy football show. We're not going to get into fantasy baseball. But that crossover helps, kind of applying those same lessons from one format to another, whether it's like football, best ball to football redraft to football dynasty. Like there is some kind of interplay here that'll like teach you lessons about how players score their points, how teams stack up relative to each other and how that affects how the players score points. Like all that stuff matters. And that's, I think, what you really need to lean into when you're analyzing these picks.
Yeah, I did just check while you were talking. If you are playing a tournament, I think the structures are consistent across all the sites. Play through week 14, and then you're put into different groups, week 15, 16, 17. You have to be in the top whatever percentage of your group to advance. The Seahawks do play the Rams in week 15, which is a playoff tournament week. So
fade him now.
You could make the argument to fade DK in tournaments, I guess. Yeah. I guess if you're flipping coins between him and who else is going next to him, Calvin, I guess.
Sure.
Maybe you go Calvin there. So interesting. Those little nuances. I mean, it's those things always. I don't know if it's a cop out or if it's actually how I think about it, but like those are always like the tiebreakers for me, the coin flips.
Yeah, but at the same time, like for something like that where you really need to be a little contrarian or differentiated in some aspect, like maybe you could also tell yourself the story like, look, if DK goes off against Jalen Ramsey or if Jalen Ramsey is hurt for that game and he goes off and other people faded him for that reason, which again, I'm not saying people are actually going to do that. I don't think people think about it in that deep of a way, but it's that whole galaxy brain. It's like, or that scene in The Princess Bride where it's like, well, you think that I think that you think that and you go back and forth until you're just an idiot. Like it doesn't matter. Just pick the guys who are going to get the most touches, the most touchdowns, aim for those spike weeks, aim for that correlation with stacks. Like that's what matters. Like we don't need to go too deep into the schedule as much as we might want to, and as much as it makes an interesting conversation between you and me right now. So maybe I should just shut up. I'm not helping anybody if I'm coming to this conclusion, but I don't know. I think it's good to hash it out, good to discuss this stuff. So anyway, let's talk about our team here, our draft. We've been really balanced over the past few rounds, kind of going back and forth between running back and wide receiver for the most part. I'm going to pull up the draft room again. Still some fine wide receivers. We could take another Bills guy. Sanders is still staring at us. Running backs, all handcuff types. Quarterback, we've said that we don't really like any of these options. And I mean, if Mac Jones had made it back to us, I think I might have tried to make the argument to you for him. But at this point, like, I don't trust any of these QBs to hold their gig for very long, unless you like really want to go deep on the making sure you get the Green Bay quarterback. I think that's just burning money. So to me, again, I think it just comes down to wide receiver and running back. And so I'm curious what you think you want to do in this spot here in round 15.
Yeah, I think their running back is. I think it's really bad. I mean, it's hard to argue a teardrop this late, but I do think there is a bit of a teardrop after like the top 5 or 6 guys in this queue. And I do think the players after us can still snipe some of our guys.
Person in the 12 spot only has 3 running backs at this point. Person in the 11 spot has 5, so we don't necessarily want to put them on running back, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't necessarily take one here. So if we want one of those running backs, we might as well figure out which one we like the most and make that pick if that's what you're thinking.
I don't know if I like him most. I think the most upside guy here is definitely Chuba. If CMC goes down, we're assuming he's the guy. I have drafted Lindsey some just because I think he's a good running back, but in a very questionable offense, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think Chubb is clearly the pick here, and then I think we're done.
I think we're done with running back at that point. So I'm going to clear them out. Yeah. And honestly, like, I don't even know, like, is it just wide receivers from here on out? Like, I guess, again, maybe if there's a tight end.
I think.
Or you could gamble on one of the quarterbacks, I suppose.
I'm going to put a test out here and to see if any of these guys are listening to us. I'm assuming the reason I took Chubb instead of a quarterback there was because the guy after us has 3 quarterbacks. The guy at the 12 spot has 4. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only quarterback left on the list that I think has a path to 16 games is Tyrod, right? I'm sorry, Tyrod.
Well done. Nice recovery.
It's Tyrod, right? He's the only guy left that has a path to 16 games, right? So I think you take Taylor as your. I think you take him as your QB3. I'm sorry, 17 games. Man,
we're gonna be screwing that one up for a while.
I got Tyrod and 16 in one sentence. That's tough to do. Tyrod for 17. It's Taylor.
Okay, let's do it. This is I've been more on the Davis Mills plan with the Houston offense, but again, because I've been drafting Mills so much, I love pivoting here to the other option there, because what if I'm wrong, right? Like let's give Tyrod or Tyrod a shot. We're stacking him with Cooks. There's some sneaky value there potentially. Again, we don't need those players to be good every single week of the season. We just need them to be good enough weeks to make up for, the bad weeks that our top quarterbacks have, when they come, Wilson and Rodgers, and hopefully those will be few and far between. It'll be interesting to see if the Tyrod Taylor starts will line up with those bad weeks from the other quarterbacks. But if not, like, as long as we have some sort of coverage with that third quarterback, I do think that's important. Yeah. And we're also, again, it's Superflex, so it's not pure 2 QB. There will be weeks when a running back or a wide receiver or even Gesicki as a tight end will end up in that Superflex spot, and we won't need 2 quarterbacks in that case either. So, I like the pick. I like making sure that we do get a third quarterback, even if it's one we're not excited about. Mm-hmm. I just think, again, from a roster construction standpoint, from a format construction standpoint, you got to do it. You really have to take a shot on a third QB when the time is right. And I do think that was a good moment for us to do that. So.
Yeah, and I don't, like, again, I try to be very cognizant of how often I'm wrong, right? So in these situations, I'm not trying to pick the best quarterback. I'm not trying to get the highest projected guy, right? Because if you look at whatever your favorite website is, hopefully it's 4for4.com.
4for4.com, baby.
If you're looking at the projections, like, out of the quarterbacks left, Drew Lock might have the highest projection because people might be assuming that, like, him and Bridgewater might, like, split starts or something. But if I look at Drew Lock, Jordan Love, Andy Dalton, and then Tyrod, who is still there, and I tell myself a story of who's going to start the majority of the season, I think Taylor makes the most sense, right?
He does.
Because Watson, at first term, he's not going to be there. He's going to be battling with Mills. And then
Who?
Dalton with Mills, right? Tyrod's going to be battling.
Sorry. I'm making a joke at Davis Mills' expense, which is not very nice. He was the first player that the Texans drafted this year, albeit in the 3rd round. Yeah. But, I agree. Like, if they want to be respectable at all, they might just have to leave Tyrod in there. That's just kind of the nature of their situation. But sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to compare it to the other situations. Like, the Broncos brought in Bridgewater, who is relatively efficient. I think that it's more likely that he plays more games than Locke. Jordan Love, I think it's most likely that Aaron Rodgers is there. With Andy Dalton, I think it's most likely that the quarterback that they drafted early ends up playing most of the season. So that's kind of like my thought process in those situations. And if I just look at raw projections, it might be any of those other guys besides Taylor. But how can I tell myself a story where that quarterback gets into my lineup? I think that's the one that makes the most sense to me.
We got a little shout out here from Ryan Late. That's an I, not an L. Late. I'm going to pronounce that incorrectly, most likely, but I'm trying, guys. Give me a break if I got it wrong. Just saying, great info, thanks, and appreciate you tuning in. TJ is obviously one of the sharpest guys out there in fantasy football, so I'm getting smarter just by doing this draft with him. But we've got a good team going here. I really like the way this draft has gone. Is there, kind of looking back at the roster so far and at the draft board as it's played out, is there any pick that you would do over at this point? Something that's kind of within reason where like, I wish Allen Robinson had been, J.K. Dobbins or something like that. You know what I mean? Like not someone who went like way later, but like a pick that kind of would have made sense in context. What do you think?
I'm very surprised at how late running backs went in general. I knew they would get pushed down because of the tight end premium and the Superflex. So I don't mind taking Gaskin there, but I've done a lot of zero running back teams, and a lot of times, like with these zero running back teams, I didn't know that I would be able to get Connor Henderson, maybe even Pollard, where Gesicki was, and Cohen. In a lot of drafts that I've done, I've had to choose between those guys. So in retrospect, knowing that I could get all of these running backs where usually I only get 2 or 3 of them, I might just go even lean harder into zero running back here. And I might have forced Lockett with Wilson over Myles Gaskin at that point instead. So, I would have, if I knew that all of these zero running back options were going to be still available to me, I might have just leaned even harder into it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think the obvious answer is like Travis Etienne was an accidental auto pick.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one we really want back. But yeah, I like that answer, thinking a little bit more about, what happens if we spend even more on wide receiver in those early rounds. Now, that's what Chris Allen and I did on last week's stream. So if anybody missed that one, you want to go check it out. It is up on our YouTube page. You can check out all the old Best Ball Live episodes that we've done with a bunch of great guests. Chris and I did the robust wide receiver build last week, and our feeling coming out of that was we should have made one of those picks a running back. So I think you can kind of argue it either way in any case. Like the problem with that draft is that we kept drafting wide receivers because we just couldn't help ourselves. Yeah, exactly. You couldn't help ourselves.
Drafting wide receivers is so fun.
And so we're we already had, I think it was Michael Thomas and 2 other players who were ranked higher than Michael Thomas. So that kind of tells you where we were at. And in hindsight, we could have just taken 5 or 6 wide receivers maybe and stopped. But we just kept going and kept going. We're like, oh man, some of these picks should have been running backs. And maybe one of even those early round guys should have been running back. But it's always easier in hindsight, which is
do yourself a favor and try to win your home league with the zero running back draft, just so you can bask in the glory of being in a garage and having your friends tell you how bad you are at fantasy football just to win the league.
Where are your running backs, bro?
It's the best high you'll get, and it's all it costs is the buy-in of your league.
Well, yeah, and that's something that I think best ball, you don't have as much, it's not as forgiving to zero RB because you don't have that waiver wire to go search up the running backs who might luck into volume out of nowhere in the season. But yeah, in your managed leagues where you just draft with your buddies and then you get to make pickups during the year, zero RB is a legit strategy, especially if you're in PPR. It kind of has to be PPR for it to work, but because the running backs do pop up on the waiver wire, if you're aggressive at that position on waivers, you can cobble together the running back position. Typically, drafts or leagues require you to start more wide receivers than running backs. So if you can really stack up those high-valued wide receivers in the early rounds, people won't see it coming, and that's the best part. They'll be like, your team sucks, you don't have any good running backs, and then you pick up some terrible running back off waivers, and there you go. I think we're on the clock here. I didn't get a audio notification, but our queue has been wiped out. That is impressive, but I think we're looking at wide receiver here, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're going wide receiver here. Did Des Fitzpatrick get drafted, or
no? I think he's just buried.
Okay.
There he is.
Or Van Jefferson.
Van. Where's Van the man? He is also available. Those are your 2 guys here?
Give me Van Jefferson.
Okay. And then we got 1 pick left here, the 1803. You mentioned Des Fitzpatrick, so I put him in the queue. We'll see if one of these drafters is listening to us and wants to snipe us on Des Fitzpatrick. I mean,
let's see if they're listening to us. I was looking for Des Fitzpatrick, and I was looking for Josh Reynolds. I've kind of been ping-ponging like these three Guys, Van Jefferson, Des Fitzpatrick, Josh Reynolds as like my last round wide receivers.
I love that you're still on Reynolds after the Julio pick because I still see the upside there, man. What if Julio gets hurt? What if A.J. Brown gets hurt? Like,
so not even that. Here's even like I'm thinking about it even beyond that. If Derrick Henry gets hurt, I think the handcuffs to Derrick Henry are Josh Reynolds, Des Fitzpatrick, and Anthony Firkser. I think that these ancillary pass catchers, if Derrick Henry goes down early in the season, there's a chance that the Titans lead the league in pass attempts from that point on. With Julio and AJ healthy and Tannehill being crazy efficient, I don't think they automatically just give the next running back. I think we could see a running back committee situation with them just throwing a ton. And in that case, there's going to be another pass catcher that goes off well. So I didn't know if Reynolds and Fitzpatrick. I think Josh Reynolds is the pick here.
They're both available.
Let's
like
go
I said,
Reynolds.
I love that you're still on Josh Reynolds because I'm still drafting him, and he's going even later now after the Julio trade. So it's great. You can get him in the last round like we just did. So, but I thought I might have been on an island with that, and so I think it helps me out to hear you say that you're into it too. Still, that's awesome. Man.
It's the one spot where you keep asking like his tournament strategy seeping in. I don't know if it's seeping in or if it's benefiting, but like I just really think buying ancillary pieces of the Titans pass catchers is this a lot of this that I've been talking about the whole draft has been like, are you drafting volume best ball? And I am. So you're building a portfolio. And I think one of the best hedges on non-Derrick Henry teams is just buying that passing game as much as possible. If anything happens to Henry, I think that passing game can just go nuclear. I think they could pass almost 700 times. Remember, we're looking at 17 games this year. If he goes down in week 1 or 2, obviously that's a huge if, but we're just looking at hedge opportunities. I don't think you need to be forcing Darrington Evans in every one of your drafts. I think going after Fitzpatrick, Reynolds, and Firkser are also hedges on Derrick Henry.
So we mentioned this briefly earlier. How concerned are you about the departure of Arthur Smith if you still have this interest in the Titans offense?
They hired from within. So I think that they promoted, I believe it was their tight ends coach.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, that suggests it's going to be a lot of the same. Their offense isn't tremendously different. Obviously, Julio's fantastic. They're not going to stop giving Derrick Henry 80% of the backfield, 85% of the backfield touches. A.J. Brown's still going to be the quarterback one. Ryan Tannehill is still an extremely efficient passer, but even with Julio, they're not going to turn into the Falcons and pass it 600 plus times as long as Derrick Henry is healthy. So I think it'll be a lot of the same. I think maybe the most interesting thing with the Arthur Smith departure isn't the Titans. I think it's where he went, the Falcons.
What's going on with the Falcons? Yes.
The Falcons traded away Julio, and everybody's trying to figure out, is it going to be Zacchaeus or Russell Gage? It might be Hayden Hurst. They went out of their way to get Hayden Hurst last year, drafted Pitts. Arthur Smith has last year with Firkser and Jonnu Smith, third highest two tight end set in the league. So all of a sudden, Falcons might be this team it's Calvin and then both of the tight ends. And hey, rookie tight ends suck, man. So everyone assuming Kyle Pitts is the tight end 4. I don't know if it's a slam dunk. Him and Hurst might be ping-ponging big weeks. Like Hurst shouldn't be off draft boards.
When we were talking earlier about what to do if you miss out on the elite tight ends and you have to draft 3, Hurst is my choice tight end 3. That's the guy I want as number 3 because he's so affordable. Somebody in that offense has to get targets, and honestly, like Russell Gage, Olamide, like, are we really trusting those wide receivers?
No, we know what they are, man. We know what they are already.
And like you said, you have that precedent of the Titans offense last year with Firkser and Jonnu operating together. I think it's like, again, like looking at last year and expecting the exact same thing to happen again, especially on a new team, might be folly. But at the same time, like the pieces fit together so well in this particular case that for me, like, yeah, Hurst is the value, at least like the one worth gambling on in these sorts of best ball scenarios.
I think I've tweeted about Hurst and Arthur Smith 3 times this offseason, and every time it's got like 0 engagement, so I don't think anybody believes it. But yeah, Hurst he's a really good, especially in super deep leagues or best balls. I think he's a really good gamble.
Yeah, let's pull up the draft board full screen here. Any of these other teams stand out to you, or builds that you like? Like we've talked about our team, we've talked about some of these early drafters. Does anybody in the middle or maybe one of these late drafters stand out to you? I did just notice that the person in the 12 spot bookended their draft with their tight ends. So Darren Waller in the first round, Ty Conklin in the last round, and that's it. Those are the tight ends. I think that's cool and cute. I don't know if it's a viable strategy, but I like it. What else do you see that you like here?
Again, a lot of this, I mean, a lot of players or teams, I'm looking at roster construction. So I'm not going to love all the players on the teams, but I'm really looking at how teams built. I really like what Team 8 did with Kyler, stacking Kyler with DeAndre Hopkins, and then coming back with Tua. Mark Andrews is like a late-ish high-end tight end. A.J. Brown, like that team, I like that team a lot. I like the Troutman Hurt. We talked about Hurst. I didn't even realize that team had Hurst.
And Mark Andrews in the 5th round. Yeah, that team does look good.
I like that team a lot.
Trey Sermon RB2. How do you feel about that?
I think the fact that he came back with Jamal Williams and Devin Singletary tells me that he kind of knows what he's doing with that build. I just like the way he built around Trey Sermon. He didn't treat it like Trey Sermon is a slam dunk. So I just like how he built around it. I like Sermon and Mostert both. I mean, that backfield is going to produce a lot of fantasy points. It's just always trying to figure out who in redraft is a nightmare, but Shanahan backfields are great, and that offense is going to be really, really good. So that team stands out to me the most.
I like the team right next to him here. Dongle in the 9 spot. 2 high-end running backs, a good tight end, not necessarily an elite one, and then made sure to get 3 quarterbacks because they waited on it, like locked up Brady, Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and then kind of played into the format by devaluing wide receiver. Again, this is the least important position in the Superflex format because you only need to start 2 in any given week. But the ones that this drafter took, Godwin is pretty stable, pretty safe. Debo, I like investing in that offense. Laviska Shenault, not really my cup of tea. Again, I already talked about how I'm skeptical of the Jaguars offense, but again, I get that pick. And you mentioned earlier how Tony Pollard is the perfect type of running back to draft when you take these elite guys up top. So I think that match of 3 running backs makes sense. And then again, like just looking at the structure, not all players that I would like, although there are some players here that I do like. Rondale Moore in particular is one that I'm interested in because of the offense that he's in. This is a structure that makes sense to me, even if the players selected aren't necessarily guys that I would go after.
Yeah. The only thing that stands out to me about that team in a negative sense is there's really no rushing from his quarterbacks, which is a huge point of emphasis for me this year.
Gotcha.
So that concerns me a bit. I really like the build from Team 5 a lot.
You just like Josh Allen. Be real. Come on.
No, I mean, of course I like Josh Allen. I like the Josh Allen wide receiver start. That's what I like. And I don't mind that he hammered running back in the middle. I hate Josh Jacobs, and I hate pairing Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones together. That just kind of you're investing relatively high draft capital in Fournette and Jones. I mean, you're paying for one position. I'd rather stagger those across my leagues than double it up in one.
Let's talk about these tight ends, because this is kind of the scenario we were talking about earlier, where this drafter might have waited a little bit too long to do the tight end shotgun spread. Ferkser, I mean, we talked about how we like Ferkser as like just being a part of that Titans passing attack, and I do like Jared Cook. So I'm actually okay with this specifically because of those 2 players being the ones he ended up with. But when Mo Alley Cox and Dawson Knox are your tight end 3, that's where you miss. Like it's almost like this Cole Beasley pick should have been Hayden Hurst, and I would have liked it a lot more.
Yeah, I think when you go Josh Allen, 5th overall, and then get another quarterback in the 4th round instead of Jimmy G, I think just go 3 tight ends in a row right there, and then I like the team a lot more. If you go Frickser, what round was Jarwin coming in? So he still could have taken Jarwin. Yeah, if he goes Frickser, Jarwin, Cook, I like that team a lot more.
Yeah,
and then doesn't even have to take another tight end and 2 more receivers that can make it in your lineup way more often than Mo Alley Cox or Dawson Knox are going to. And then you can still get, whatever gamble quarterback. Like Jimmy Garoppolo is just as much as a gamble quarterback as these other late guys that went after him. So why not just take another tight end there and gamble on a quarterback 3 when you have 2 guys that are probably going to start every game this year already?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the Dawson Knox pick, I mean, in hindsight, or like now that I'm really thinking about the stack with Josh Allen, that pick makes more sense to me. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier.
Then don't take Mo Alley Cox there. Then.
Exactly. That's right. Or just, if you want to stack, just take Dawson Knox where you took Mo Alley Cox and take a different position there. But that's something that is kind of interesting. And that is where the roster construction, like fundamentals come in, right? Like if we're trying to be the Tim Duncan of this draft, like if you take 3 quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds, like this number 4 drafter did, do you really need a 4th quarterback? Like logic says no, like you don't. Like this is kind of capping your upside. You're losing a player at another position to make this pick. And that's why I don't like it. Could it work out for this drafter? Sure. Like they could still win the league if like the weeks line up properly, if they hit on all their other positions, it's fine. But that sort of stuff, again, these extra tight end picks down here that are kind of redundant, like that sort of stuff is what I'm trying to avoid when I'm putting these teams together. But anyway, go ahead.
That team, I'll just say that teammate is sexy. I think going back to that one, that's one that stands out to me. We got a Tim Tebow sighting, so shout out to Team 2 with Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow ahead of some of these other tight ends too is kind of wild. Although once you're down into this range, like it's kind of no holds barred when it comes to tight end. Although Zach Ertz in the 18th round, what are you doing with Zach Ertz this year? Because I mean, the writing's on the wall that he's going to end up on a different team. That could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing. But is he toast? Is he dust, as the kids say? I don't know.
It's the only argument I have for Ertz is one team that I've heard floated quite a bit is the Bills. And if he does end up in the Bills, I like them a lot. If he gets traded to the Bills, his ADP is going to skyrocket. I think people might overreact like crazy. So the argument would be to get a couple of shares now just in case that happens. Not even because I think he would even produce still, but just because it's the poker term, the Skolansky bucks. Like if you're getting him in the 17th or 18th round and in a month he shoots up to round 9, you just have a lot of intrinsic value on your team. So that would be my one thought about getting him. With all that said, I have 0 shares of him right now.
Yeah, I haven't drafted him once. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. Like I can see the upside, but if a player doesn't have a home, and I mean, at least with Ertz, like the story is that he's going to play this year, and you can easily buy that story. With Watson, it's like,
I think the article
it's hot near.
The article that I read was written on the 3rd, so right before the holiday or the holiday weekend. So maybe it just hasn't got any run yet. But the discussion about his case probably not even taking place until basically they're saying case not even taking place until 2022, commissioner exempt list in the next month or so, and him possibly not playing until 23.
Too much risk of zeros in the lineup, man. Like and zeros across the entire season, you just can't have that. At least with Ertz, like even if you expect him to play, he gets hurt and he gives you zeros half the year. Like at least the other half of the year, he was potentially scoring points in your lineup. Like all indications of that Watson is just not going to be there for you this year. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm okay missing on him if he does play. TJ, this has been great. I want to remind all the viewers to head over to 4for4.com, subscribe. When you do, you'll get a $35 coupon to use here at the FFPC to do a draft like this, to do one of their larger drafts like the 28 rounders with kickers and defenses. They have slims that are 1 quarterback. All sorts of different options. A bunch of them are great and great prep for your managed leagues that you'll be drafting later in the offseason. Anything you want to throw out there before we sign off? Anything you've been working on or other great work at 4for4.com you want to plug? Hit me.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of plugged it up front a little bit. A ton of best ball stuff, especially FFPC specific content. I've been really zeroing in on best ball tournaments lately. So if you check out my Twitter at TJ Hernandez or just on 4for4, you can see that. We have a ton of new writers at 4for4, and we've been putting out a lot of player profiles and debates. Jennifer Akins has been doing a ton of content lately. So just get over there, check that out. It's the first week of July, so we're about 2 weeks away from the first DFS MVP podcast this season. Just kind of leaning into some theory, and we're relatively close to some preseason DFS. So,
let's go.
Yeah, so I am very close to shifting into DFS mode. So thanks for getting me here in my small redraft / best ball window.
I love it. Yeah. So head over to 4for4.com, subscribe, get access to all of TJ's work, all the other great work that those writers are churning out. Follow the site on Twitter at 4for4football. You can follow me on there at Greg Sauce. You can follow TJ at TJ Hernandez. Want to thank you all very much for hanging out with us. Be back again. Actually, I will not be back again next week. I'm going on vacation with the family. So my 2 QBs compatriot, Sal Stefanelli, is going to step in and guest host a show next week with the great Sean Siegel. You're going to want to see how those guys approach one of these FFPC Superflex drafts. And, of course, Best Ball Live will be coming back to you just this week again with James Coe, drafting underdog best ball. TJ, I know you've been deep in those underdog streets as well. I think you've even been a guest with James. So, yeah, that's another fun show, a different format. But honestly, like I talked about earlier, like there's a lot of crossover in strategy and ideas you can carry between one format and the other. And sometimes you need to see it play out in a different way to help you understand like how, the other format ticks. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, TJ, any final thoughts here before we sign off?
No, man, I'm just excited that we're pretty much in fantasy football season. So check out everything that we've mentioned, and cheers. Enjoy your vacation, man.
Yeah, salute. Good luck in Scott Fishbowl to you and everybody else watching this who might be involved. And hopefully I'll be back on the clock once I sign off here. Get to make a couple more picks. So be looking forward to that. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. This has been Best Ball Live presented by 4for4.com. Have a good night.